currently. It was September 29th in the year 1913 that Rudolf Diesel, inventor of the engine that bears his name, disappeared from the steamship Dresden while traveling from Antwerp, Belgium to Harwich, England. On October 10th, a Belgian sailor aboard a North Sea steamer spotted a body floating in the water. Upon further investigation, it turned out that the body was Diesel's. There was and remains a great deal of mystery surrounding his continuance of eternity. It was officially judged a suicide, but many people believed and still believe that Diesel was murdered. Diesel patented a design for his engine on February 28th in 1892. The following year, he explained his design in a paper called Theory and Construction of a Rational Heat Engine to Replace Steam Engine and Contemporary Combustion Engine. He called his invention a compression ignition engine that could burn any fuel. Later on, the prototypes he built would run on peanut or vegetable oil and needed no ignition system. It ignited by introducing fuel into a cylinder full of air that had been compressed to an extremely high pressure and was therefore extremely hot. An engine such as this would be unprecedentedly efficient. This was Diesel's leading argument. In contrast to the other steam engines of the era, which wasted more than 90% of their fuel energy, Diesel calculated that his could be as much as 75% efficient. That is, just 1/4 of their energy would be wasted. The most efficient engine that Diesel ever actually built had an efficiency of 26%, not quite 75%, but still much better than its peers. By 1912, there were more than 70,000 diesel engines working around the world, mostly in factories and generators. Eventually, Diesel's engines would revolutionize the railroad industry. After World War II, trucks and buses also started using diesel-type engines that enabled them to carry heavy loads much more economically. At the time of Diesel's continuance of eternity, he was on his way to England to attend the groundbreaking of a new diesel engine plant and to meet with the British Navy about installing his engine on their submarines. Conspiracy theories began to fly almost immediately. Inventor thrown into sea to stop sale of patents to British government was one leading theory of the day. Another worried that Diesel was murdered by agents from Big Oil Trust. There's a line from the platform that I use that I will not go forward with, and it is that it is likely that Diesel did throw himself overboard. As it turns out, he was nearly broke. I don't like that History.com placed that there, and I'll tell you why. The person that wrote this probably didn't know him. This happened in 1912. And you can't accumulate facts from third parties and be a third party and say something so rude. It is likely that Diesel did throw himself. Likely, you're going to say that about someone's suicide and you don't, or someone's murder possibly. I think that was wrong, and shame on you, History.com. The people of our era, of this planet, of this time, probably won't know what really happened. But truth is eternal and everlasting. It was on September 29th in the year 1988 that Stacey Allison of Portland, Oregon, became the first American woman to reach the summit of Mount Everest, which at 29,035 feet above sea level is the highest point on Earth. Using the Southeast Ridge route, Allison, a member of the Northwest American Everest Expedition, climbed the Himalayan peak. Mount Everest sits on the crest of the Great Himalayas in Asia, lying on the border between Nepal and Tibet. Called Chomolungma, or Mother Goddess of the Land by the Tibetans, the English named the mountain after Sir George Everest, a 19th century British surveyor of South Asia. The summit of Everest reaches 2/3 of the way through the air of the Earth's atmosphere at about the cruising altitude of jet airliners, and oxygen levels there are very low. Temperatures are extremely cold, and weather is unpredictable and very dangerous. In May of 1953, climber and explorer Edmund Hillary of New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay of Nepal made the first recorded successful climb of the peak. Ten years later, James Whitaker of Redmond, Washington became the first American to top the peak, reaching the Everest summit with his Sherpa climbing partner, Ngawang Gambu. In 1975, Japanese mountaineer Junko Tabei became the first recorded woman to conquer the mountain. Three years later, Reinhold Messner of Italy and Peter Habeler of Austria achieved what had been previously thought impossible, climbing to the Everest summit without oxygen. In 1988, American Stacy Allison successfully scaled Everest. It should be noted that about 24 climbers continued their eternity in attempts to reach the top of Everest in the 20th century. It was September 29th in the year 1995 that voting rights advocate Willie Velasquez is posthumously awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Velasquez and the organizations he founded are credited with dramatically increasing political awareness and participation among the Hispanic communities of the southwestern United States. The son of a union organizer, Velasquez was one of 5 founders of the Mexican American Youth Organization, or MAYO. Beginning with voter registration drives and walkouts on college campuses around San Antonio, MAYO expanded to organizing high school students and even succeeded in electing several candidates to local school boards. Inspired by groups like the Black Panthers and leaders like Malcolm X, some of MAYO's members went to form the Raza Unida Party, a party that aimed to elect Hispanic candidates without relying on either the Republican or Democratic establishments. Velasquez worked as a boycott coordinator for the United Farm Workers, a union that organized farm workers across the Southwest and drew national attention to their working conditions in the late 1960s. He then went to work for the Raza Unida Party before embarking upon the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project in 1972. The Southwest Voter Registration Education Project, whose motto was Su vota, su voz, your vote is your voice, sought to address the poor voter turnout, voter apathy, and institutional disenfranchisement that affected the Hispanic American community. Velasquez believed that the Hispanic community had much to learn from the civil rights movement and sought to address many of the same systemic issues as prominent leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. Though his physical presence would not remain on the planet to see the full effects of his work, he continued his eternity suddenly of cancer at the age of 44. Willie Velasquez certainly achieved his goal of activating the Hispanic electorate. Today, the Southwest Voter Registration Education Project claims to have registered over 2.7 million voters, trained over 150,000 political activists, and won over 100 civil rights lawsuits. Though Hispanic voter turnout is often significantly lower than turnout among whites, it has risen sharply in recent decades, increasing tenfold from 1.3 million in the 1994 general election to 13.5 million in 2016. In the 42nd President Bill Clinton's White House speech honoring Willie Velasquez, President Clinton stated that Willie Velasquez's name was one that was synonymous with democracy. Historic information divulged and documented on the Zaire file can be verified on the